Welcome back, everyone. In today's video, I am going to reveal my top 3 favorite DACs in 3 price ranges: the under $3,000 category, the under $10,000 category, and the under, let's say, $100,000 category. Let's have some fun. Let's take a look at these 3 beautiful DACs. So right here I have the Denafrips Pontus 15th. Now, I reviewed the original Pontus 2 or 3 years ago, and I loved it for its sound. But at the time, the original Pontus, Pontus 2, I should say, had a more laid-back presentation, an enriching presentation. It was really a middle-of-the-road DAC, but it was punching above its weight. I did not hear the Pontus 12th anniversary, but right here, the Pontus 15th anniversary, I've had here for a couple of months now. I've been listening to it. I've been comparing it to other DACs that I've had in here that I have in here currently. And it's a different kind of sound for the Pontus, at least in my opinion. What I'm hearing from this Pontus is a little more energy. The instruments and vocals seem to pop out more into the room, versus the OG Pontus 2, which had more of a laid-back vibe. There's an energy with the Pontus that's really, really nice, but it does bring those instruments and vocals a little more into the room. So the Denafrips Pontus has really been a very popular DAC because it sits under the $2,000 price range, and in the past, previous versions have punched up a little bit above that price. Now, I always say right now that the Denafrips Pontus 2 in any form is one of the DACs I really, really love in the under $3,000 price point. But the Denafrips Pontus 15th, I would say, is my recommended choice. If you have $3,000 or under to spend on a DAC only, this is what I would buy with my money. Now, it's a fully featured DAC. It's a R2R ladder DAC. It's 24 bits. It does DSD. It does PCM. Check the website, or I'll just throw up the stats and specs right here on the video. It has all of the inputs and outputs you need: I2 squared, coax, USB, Toslink. It has XLR out. It also has RCA outs. Now, one thing I like about the Denafrips Pontus design, and it's no exception here, is it has a box within a box sort of construction where they keep the linear power supply separated from the main DAC board underneath it, right, separated by metal. So it's literally almost a 2-box design, but it's all within one box, and this helps to keep interference away, noise away, things that harm the signal, right? Also, Denafrips says this is a true non-oversampling DAC, meaning if you feed it, whatever you feed it, if you have it in NOS mode, which you can choose right here on the front panel, then it will play exactly what is coming in from your source, whether it be a computer, whether it be a streamer, what have you. Now, it does have upsampling, but I have found in my use over the last couple of months, I prefer the non-oversampling mode. It just seems a little bit richer, it seems a little more real, and it seems a little bit more human. But I always kind of veer that way when it comes to DACs with their built-in oversamplers. So another thing about the Pontus 15th is all the inputs go to the clock inside of the Denafrips, and the signals are reclocked. So the Pontus 15th also has an all-alloy enclosure. This is all metal, it's not plastic. There's also been upgrades, major upgrades, says Denafrips, to the capacitors. I'll show you an image here of what the Pontus 12th anniversary looks like inside, next to this Pontus 15th inside. You can see the differences here with the capacitors. And I think this is what is taking this up to the next level versus the older versions. So the Denafrips also uses silver wire inside for the power transfer from PSU to DAC. So that's pretty cool as well. One thing Denafrips says about the Pontus 15th is it's less reliant on your source quality. meaning they're saying that because this is so refined and enhanced, whether you use a low quality streamer, or I should say an inexpensive streamer, there's some really great quality ones that are not too much money, or you're using a high-end streamer, that you should get similar sound quality. So I tested this. I played it with my HiFi Rose RS130 that I've now had here for over a year. I still love this streamer, though I know there's better out there. You got to pay much more money to get that better. So I love the RS130. It's been a phenomenal streamer, and recently I've been upsampling from the Hi-Fi Rose going into the DACS. So for this experiment, I tried the RS130, which is a $5,200 streamer only. Then I tried the WIM Ultra streamer going into this DAC, which is what, $300. And I noticed just a little bit of a change in sound. It wasn't really better or worse, just a different presentation. So the claims from Denafrips are kind of spot on. You can get great sound even if you're using a less expensive, a lower grade streamer, because the DAC is doing a lot of the work. So this is the DAC I would pick in the under $3,000 price point. Now this DAC is made in China, but Denafrips is well known. They've been around for a long time. They have a lot of happy customers. A lot of people buy the Pontus as their endgame DAC because you don't have to spend thousands, tens of thousands to get an endgame DAC. It depends on what you like. And if you like a sound that is full-bodied, that comes out a little bit into the room, images nicely, it's not a crazy 3D holographic type of vibe, but it plays music in a beautiful way, and it does have some three-dimensional aspects. The imaging is really, really nice, a little subdued, but when you're hearing vocals, for example, they come out a little bit into the room. They're not big and beefy and chesty, but they're clear. And when you're hearing acoustic guitars or even violins or acoustic instruments, I should say, the way they come out is natural and really, really nice. So really, really good DAC here. Denafrips has really improved it, and I feel in the 15th version. So yeah, that's my take on the Denafrips Pontus 15th. All right, so let's move on. Next, we're going to talk about a DAC in the $6,000 to $7,000 range. All right, so now you can see I have the Holo May KTA edition here. This is the top end of the Holo May range. It has custom handpicked parts inside, the new USB circuit, or the newer USB circuit, and all of the goodies, top-end Holo May. Now, if Holo May, I'm sure those watching have heard about this DAC. It's been out for a few years. Everybody in the review world, I think, has reviewed the Holo May. And most importantly, a lot of people buy this KTA edition because it is packed with these custom bespoke parts and all of that good stuff. There's a lot of technical information on this DAC, so I'll put a link to the Holo Audio website below if you want to check out every little detail and every little spec. My focus here is on the sound quality, and as well as the functions and some of the features. So I've been listening to this DAC for a few weeks now, and I was told by Tim, who distributes this DAC, it's made in China, but Tim over at Kitsune Audio is the one who distributes this DAC, who sells this DAC, where you can get this DAC. And we've been chatting back and forth through email. He wanted to send me one of these, or I actually requested it. I said, can I review the May KTA? Because I heard one before, but very short time period, and I didn't hear it in a system like I have today. So I wanted to hear it, reevaluate it, because there's a reason this DAC is so popular and well loved. And I'll tell you what that reason is. It is a very analog sounding DAC, and that's its claim to fame. It has a non-oversampling mode that sounds absolutely gorgeous. It has an oversampling mode that I didn't think sounded as gorgeous as the non-oversampling mode. Now, there's a couple of quirks with this DAC I'll talk about quickly in a minute, but this does have an analog vibe. I would say that this DAC, when in my system streaming from my HiFi Rose RS130, whether it's Tidal, Qobuz, or even Spotify, this sounds more like a high-end vinyl rig to me, without the noise, without the pops and clicks. It has a rich, warm-leaning vibe with big body, big bass. My speakers came alive in the low end with this, and listening to heavier music, EDM, rock, metal, that kind of thing, was really blowing me out of the room, but in a good way. Listening to classical, listening to jazz, listening to acoustic brought body to each instrument, to each string. Saxophones sound alive and realistic with the Holo made DAC. Now, some say this is a true endgame DAC, and there's DACs out there that cost $100,000. The next DAC I'm going to talk about after this retails for almost, what, $48,000? And I'm going to tell you the differences of what that gets you, but this is a DAC for almost 99% of audiophiles, of music lovers, of people in this hobby who were trying to build a system that just sounds musical and right. This DAC does that. Now, not only does it sound beautiful and have that analog richness, it does bring details. The details come out and they're not in your face or in the forefront, but they're kind of a little mellow, but they're there. The reverb trails, the decay, it's all here. And the sound stage is not only wide, it's very deep. So it places those performers, say you're listening to a live performance, right? And you close your eyes, you should be able to tell with a really good hi-fi system where the bass player is, where the drummer is, where the singer is, where the guitar player is, etc. And this DAC will do that for you quite a bit more so than the Denafrips, but this is double or more price than the Denafrips. And you are getting that much performance. You have a dual box design because the power supply is separated from the main DAC, and that goes a long way in creating a super black background, right? The Denafrips had the box within a box. This has two boxes. So the noise level is non-existent here. When I power this on, I hear zero noise. It's almost surgically silent. So that surgical silence means your music is popping out of that blackness in an even more beautiful way. This is a beautiful DAC, one I could sit in my chair, have a glass of scotch, sit back, and just revel in the beauty. It's a beauty DAC. It sounds amazing. Now, it has all the inputs you need. It has optical, coax, I2 squared, USB, you name it. It's all here, AES, XLR out, RCA out. It is a dual mono design. So it has two transformers, one for each channel, which I don't think I've seen in a DAC yet. It has two dual DAC chips, custom DAC chips, right? These are not off-the-shelf anything. This is an R2R ladder DAC, and everything in here is pretty much custom. So you have one for the right, one for the left. And this goes a long way in helping with separation. So the instruments are beautifully separated within the soundstage. This is a true endgame DAC if you like warm, big scale, body to the instruments, and big bass, and as well as some details and beautiful vocals. But everything's a little dialed to the warm side, a little bit. It's not like this bloated warm DAC, not at all. It's just warm enough to bring that uber musicality to the sound, but it has all the traits of some big mega DACs, but just never in your face. This is another DAC that is never in your face. In the past, I've had DACs that do the wow thing, right? You turn them on and you're just blown away instantly because these details are being thrown at you and everything sounds 3D. But you know, over time, over months with those DACs, I found myself getting a little tired because the mid-range, the mid-bass was always a little bit lean, and even the bass, the bottom bass was lean because it was trying to be so controlled and tight, it lost some of that beauty and that glow in the bass. This doesn't do that. This has all of that intact. So while it's not going to be anything like a Chord Dave in the detail department, it's just a beautiful sounding DAC because it brings that body. The timbre of instruments is beautiful. And you know, it just sounds lovely. Now, they say there's a long break-in with this, and for several weeks I ran it 24/7. And when it first started, it seemed a little tipped up in the treble. Then over time, it seemed to get a little lean in the mids and then a little bit bloated in the bass. And after, I'd only say it didn't take long for me. I'd say after I don't know, 100 hours of run-in, it really opened up and became really, really beautiful. But it is, again, it's not a wide open thing. This is a slow burner. And what I mean by that is the more you listen to it, the more you're going to fall in love with it. So this is my DAC recommendation in the under $10,000 category. If you have 10, maybe even 12,000, be sure to check out the Holo May, and I highly suggest or recommend the KTA edition. Now, these are made in China, but they're sold by Tim, and they are also warranted for 3 years. Now, I want to talk about a little quirk I had with this that a lot of people have with this. There is a custom PLL built in here, nothing off the chip, and Tim says it's just an amazing setup here, but what I found is when using it with my HiFi Rose RS130, if I go into the coax input, and I have a really nice Shunyata Omega cable that I like, running it that way, the DAC wasn't locking onto the signal right away. It was taking 7 to 9 seconds every time I switched a song on Tidal. And it would cut off that 7 to 9 seconds. So I asked Tim about this, and he says you can, if you use Rune or HQ Player, which most people, not most, but a lot of people use HQ Player on their computer to upsample going into this. I'm not an HQ Player kind of guy. I just like simple, set it, forget it. I like a streamer. I upsample my HiFi Rose to maximum into this, and it sounds lovely when in NOS, non-oversampling mode. But that issue, Tim said, you can use Rune and HQ Player or set the Rose. You can set the delay time in the HiFi Rose, but you're still going to have that 7 to 9 second delay. And that was, to me, not really acceptable. I didn't like that. And what I ended up doing was turning off the PLL. Now, a lot of people online will say if you turn that off, you're losing a lot of the goodness of this DAC. But with the Rose and the Shunyata cable going in with the PLL off, I didn't have any issues with locking or delay, and it sounded just as good. I mean, it really did. I didn't notice any loss of sound quality. So that was a workaround for me. The second workaround is to use the USB input, which is very, very good here. And ultimately, what I stuck with using it, because it just edged out that coax. So using the USB input here gave me no delays, no issues, and it sounded awesome. But that little thing is there, and researching it online, I found others had the same issue. It's just an inherent issue with this DAC, and I wouldn't call it an issue because the custom PLL in here is a feature that improves the DAC, but there are some niggles with it. Now, when I tried the Electro Compagnie streamer into this, there were no delays going into coax. So most people are not even going to have that issue. And Tim said it's a rare issue to have, but the HiFi Rose streamer brought the issue. The Electro Compagnie streamer did not. So it's not all on the DAC itself. And to me, it was really a big nothing burger because at the end of the day, I had 2 solutions to fix it when running the HiFi Rose. So still, this is my top recommended DAC in the under $10,000 category. The hype is real on this one if you like the analog, warm leaning sound that still brings details, but it's super refined and super low noise because of the dual power supply, the dual transformers, and the dual DACs just bring it up to the next level. So let's move on to a DAC that retails for $46,000 or $48,000. It's a current model from Nagra, and yeah, let's talk about it because that's insane. All right, so here is what I would call my desert island ultimate endgame, holy grail DAC. The problem is if you go to a dealer and buy one, the retail is in the upper $40,000 range, close to $50,000. So if you were to pay retail for this out the door after tax, you're going to pay over $50,000. And this is just a DAC, right? There's no streamer here. There's nothing else. You can use it as a preamp, which is pretty cool. But man, I just have a hard time understanding how a DAC can cost so much money. Now, this is made in Switzerland. Now, I remember I've been in Switzerland before. I was actually at the Matterhorn Mountain in 2011, I think it was, maybe 2010. I was the photographer on the Seal tour, the Singer Seal, and we went up to Matterhorn and we stayed in Switzerland there um, for 2 or 3 days. And it was one of my favorite places on earth, this little town we went to. And we toured the Matterhorn Mountain and all the shops and little restaurants. We hung out at a coffee shop, a bar. We took a lot of photos. But that is where these DACs are made in Switzerland. This is where the whole Nagra line is made. And Nagra is a Summit Fi brand. A couple of years ago, I did a review of the classic preamp, the classic amp, and the classic DAC. And that system burnt a hole in my brain, left a memory for life. But when I bought it, I bought them all used, well used. They were 5+ years old. One of the classic amp had an issue with the meter; it wouldn't stop lighting up, and it was working weird. The preamp I had didn't even have the feet or bass. This here comes with the vibration bass, the anti-vibration bass, which is a marvel of engineering. The classic power supply, which powers the analog and digital sections of this with two different cables. And then you have the DAC up here, which is a fully custom DAC that works in the DSD domain, from what I understand. Now, since that memory of that Nagra Classic system burned a hole in my brain and I never forgot about it. So that Classic system, I sold it because that was the plan from the get-go. I bought it used, bought all three pieces. It was like $25,000 for 5-year-old components. I wanted to buy it to scratch that itch I had about Nagra. Are they really as good as they say? Are they worth that kind of money? And I had to sell it because I had to get my money back, because that wasn't disposable income for me. And there was no way I could keep that kind of money out on 3 pieces of audio gear at that time. But since letting that go back then, this brand has stayed in my brain. And I always say, if I won the lottery, the brand I would buy is Nagra without question, because the sound of that classic system was just drop dead beautiful, flat out amazing, the best I've ever heard. Now, when I had that system, I was reading about this DAC, the tube DAC, and I was like, oh my God, imagine what this DAC sounds like. And here we are, I have one here, and I did it again. I bought this used from Paragon Audio in Michigan. They had it used. They're not a dealer for Nagra, but they are a dealer for some high-end brands like DCS, etc. And somebody traded this in there on something else, and it's a mint condition set, the tube DAC. You have the platform, the power supply, and the DAC, right? And I said to myself, I have to try this DAC. So silly me, I put it on my credit card. And the idea was, I'll review it, I'll listen to it for a month or two, and then I'll sell it and pay off the credit card. Because again, I'm not a rich guy. I'm not wealthy. I'm not the target audience for Nagra, which I believe are people with money. And if you have money, heck, this is the brand you'd want to buy. So the DAC arrived. I was listening to the KTA, the Holo KTA. I put this in, and I was just immediately floored. Now, running the same system with Pure Audio Project Duet 15s, which are stunning, Borson X2s, the Electro Compagnie ECI 60X2 integrated, along with the HiFi Rose RS130 streamer. In this system, it's hard to explain. No other DAC that I've ever heard brought my system up to so many levels. This is a very, very engaging, emotionally engaging DAC to listen to. It's smooth, yet the detail is incredible, but the detail isn't sharp. It has a way of, I can't even describe it. It's just magic. It's pure magic what it does for vocals, for acoustic instruments. Saxophones. The sax comes out in a life-size 3D manner, like it's a real person there with a real sax. And it's a couple feet from my head in this 3D space. And then acoustic guitars. Each string has body. and harmonic texture. The timbre of the instruments is spot on. Vocals are heavenly. Female vocals, you swear they're in the room with you. Now, I've heard DACs that make it sound like they're in the room with you, but never to this extent. Never in such a back to front three-dimensional way, never in such a refined, smooth way. And the details present are incredible. The low-level details just come out in a smooth, rich way. And I've never heard a DAC recreate the spatial cues as lovely as this. Reverb trails, the sounds in the studio or on the stage from the venue. You could almost pick out different venues that the artist is in. So sound quality wise, this is Summit Fi Endgame Holy Grail. Take it to the grave without question. But even used, and I got a deal on this, they're usually more than that used, 18,000. I've never seen anything, a tube DAC go for less than that. So that's why another reason I snagged it. I made them an offer. They were asking for more money. And they accepted the offer, and it arrived in 2 days after I paid. And now I got this on my credit card at some crazy interest rate. What am I going to do? Well, after I've been spending some time with it, I'm just going to start making the credit card payments and pay that down as fast as I can, because once you hear this, and this is the danger, don't audition this DAC unless you have the means to somehow purchase it. It has elevated this system to a level I never thought it could grow to. And this is just by using the DAC. Of course, then my head goes, man, I wish I could get that classic amp back or the classic preamp and make a whole system, but that would bankrupt me. And, that's just crazy. Now, the retail price on this costs about what my 2023 Ford Bronco two-door Wildtrak costs. For example, I could sell it for $48,000 with about 10,000 miles on it, maybe a little more. And which would I choose? The tube DAC? Would I sell my Bronco to fund a brand new tube DAC? I thought about that this morning, and at the end of the day, I said, no, I'd probably keep my Bronco. I love that truck. But I love music just as much, and I love audio. I love being sucked into the performance. I love that emotional connection. I always say there's no such thing as the best or perfect audio gear, but for me, this is perfect, and this is the best DAC I've ever heard in my life, and most likely ever will. Now, let me say, I have heard the Playback Designs Dream DAC, and that guy who designed that DAC, I can't think of his name off the top of my head. I don't script these out. He had a part in designing this DAC, and that Playback Designs DAC is very special as well. I think it's 25, 30,000, something in that range. But when I heard that DAC, it was a little sharper in the details. I heard it with a Magnapan setup, and this one is just holistic. It's organic. It's beautiful, the most soul-stirring DAC I've ever heard. I've also heard an MSB DAC. It was like $100,000, and that blew my mind as well, but that's $100,000. It was a little more meatier and wetter sounding. This is just, the music flows like it's part of your room, but in a way that I've never, ever heard. Now, this also has a beautiful, wonderful USB input. That's how I've been using it. And it also has the standard inputs, your optical, your coax, etc. There's XLR outs, there's RCA outs, and everything here is just stunning. One cool thing about this that's remarkable. Now, this powers, or the classic PSU powers the DAC, and there's two cables. One powers the digital section and one powers the analog section, but inside this DAC, there are 25 power supplies that power each little part of the DAC. It's incredible, and there's no noise. It's dead silent. Nagra handpicks the single tube that goes in here to military specs, so you're not going to get crackles or pops. The tubes last between 5 and 10,000 hours. It's one tube, and I am buying a spare tube from Glenn over at Arizona HiFi. And let me throw a shout out to them as well, because they are a Nagra dealer. And Glenn has been selling Nagra for quite a few years. And he has Nagra on display. I know he used to. I haven't been there in a couple of years. But I contacted him and I was looking for a tube just to have a spare, and he happened to have one. So I'm buying that tube from him. So check out Arizona HiFi if you're looking for Nagra gear. Other than that, this is just a masterpiece. Is it worth the $48,000 if you paid full retail? It depends on your passion for audio, and it depends on your bank account. If I had 10 million in the bank, heck, if I had a million in the bank, maybe 2 million, I'd buy the whole Nagra setup, maybe even the HD amps, and I'd buy them new because they're incredible. This brand makes, it's not just about the looks, it's about the build quality. The parts are of the highest quality inside. So many engineers worked on this and they really knew what they were doing. There's a headphone out here. It's just a beautiful, beautiful piece, and everything functions. Everything feels so beautiful. So it's about the build, it's about the style, but most importantly for me, it comes down to the sound. And I've never heard a DAC make such a huge jump in performance. It's addictive, it's seductive, and it's something that once you hear, it would be really hard to go back from. All right, well, there you go. Those are my 3 recommended DACs in those 3 price points. The Denafrips Pontus 15th in the under $3,000 category, and it is a lovely, lovely DAC in the mid-tier range. The Holo Audio May KTE is a tour de force. It is an analog lover's dream. If you're looking to make your digital sound more analog, this is a DAC that will do it. Luscious, full-bodied, beautiful sound. The under $100,000 category was the Nagra Tube DAC, and that is just a drop-dead gorgeous, ethereal, holistic, speak to the heart, speak to the soul, cavernous soundstage with beautiful, refined details and body to each instrument, each sound. The vocals are hauntingly real. It brings those performers into the space unlike anything I've heard, but that DAC is going to cost you. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. I will see you guys soon in the next one. If you like this, thumbs up and subscribe. And I love you all. I'll see you again in the next video very, very soon.